Good afternoon. I love when someone sets the bar really high for you. I want to start with something that none of us have planned for. It's not a crisis exactly. It's not an emergency. It's just a quiet, uninvited question that arrives one day and doesn't leave. What's next? For me, it arrived in my 60s. I'd lived a good life, a healthy life. I'd eaten well, exercised regularly, practiced yoga and meditation, raised a son, had several successful professions, and accomplished most of what I'd set out to do. People always said to me, "You look so much younger than you are." I hadn't been to a doctor more than once or twice in 25 years. I was the guy who thought he had it all figured out, the guy who was bulletproof. Then 65 arrived, and things I'd taken for granted started changing. Body parts that had been silent my whole life started talking trash. Work slowed down, friends moved away, and there began to be things I couldn't do anymore. Though they were minor things, they just kept coming. For the first time in my life, I heard a voice inside reminding me unceasingly that there was still so much I wanted to do, that I was not immortal, and much to my surprise, I was not going to live forever. But the most frightening was the realization I was mentally, emotionally, and spiritually not prepared for what was coming. Then both of my parents died. My son, his wife, and my 3 granddaughters moved away, and a low-grade depression settled in that I just could not shake. I felt like I was standing at the edge of something enormous without a map or a parachute. What was really terrifying was that I began to hear myself responding negatively to opportunities, invitations, and decisions. I don't really like that anymore. Why bother? I'm tired, and the most dangerous of all, I don't want to. I've since come to understand I was facing something nobody had told me about and nothing had prepared me for. I could see in myself and my friends how our worlds were shrinking, not dramatically, not all at once, but shrinking, one small decision at a time. I was at a natural rite of passage, one that happens to all of us if we live long enough. It was what I have come to understand as the third act identity crisis. Now, an identity crisis does not have to be a breakdown. It is really an opportunity for a breakthrough. It's a series of decisions at the end of our second act. Are we going to contract and watch our lives get smaller and less inspiring? Or are we going to expand and step into a whole new life? One where we embrace all of the anythings and all of the possibilities that still exist for us. So, what does our culture tell us about how to live and thrive in the next chapter of our lives? Not much, really. And what it does tell us isn't all that uplifting or inspiring. Retirement is sold as the finish line, the reward, the thing you've been working toward. Except finish lines are for races, and your life is not a race. What nobody tells you is what happens after the finish line. Nobody prepares you for the calendar that suddenly has gaps in it. Life after work, an empty nest, and a body that often feels like it's betraying you more than serving you. The loss of structure, of identity, and of the role that for 30 or 40 years told you who you were. Nobody prepares you for what happens when freedom has no direction, and maybe you have a little too much free time. The research on this is striking. In the blue zones, those places on Earth where people live beyond 100 years, researchers found 2 things that everyone has in common. It's not diet, though diet matters. It's not exercise, though that matters too. It is a strong connection to their community and what the Japanese refer to as Ikigai, a reason to wake up in the morning. Purpose and connection create hope, and without hope, life has no purpose. People with a strong sense of community, connection, and purpose live longer, recover faster from illness, experience more happiness, and report a dramatic higher quality of life satisfaction. This is not soft wisdom, it's science. So the question it forces us to consider is this: why do so many of us arrive at the richest chapter of our lives with more time, more experience, and more hard-won wisdom than we've ever had and decide to contract? I have a theory. We've been given a story about aging that no longer serves us. A story that says these final chapters are about winding down, fading out, and at best declining gracefully. And because nobody gave us a better story or offered us any inspiring role models, maybe we've been living inside that story by default. Obviously not you volunteers. Today, I want to offer you a different story. The final chapters, like the third act in a book or a movie, is where the whole story comes together, where you, the hero of your story, rise to the occasion, overcome your obstacles, and become all you've hoped to be. In Buddhism, there's a figure called the Bodhisattva. He's an individual who is at the threshold of enlightenment, nirvana, the ultimate liberation, and he chooses, out of a profound compassion for others, to delay it and remain in the world to help relieve the suffering of others before he crosses over. In Alcoholics Anonymous, one of the fundamental principles of that program is that in order to remain sober and find your way to happiness, you must share your experience, strength, and hope. In other words, you cannot keep what you don't give away. In the Native American tradition, elders are the wisdom keepers. They are consulted on every decision that affects the tribe. They are the living bridge between the ancestors and the generations yet to come. And in those cultures, there is an unspoken social covenant. You, elder, share your wisdom, teach the young, and be the caretaker of our traditions. And we, your family, your tribe, and your community will take care of you. I believe the most practical and spiritually advanced thing a human being can do is give away the gift they've accrued from a lifetime of learning, growing, failing, and succeeding. This is what I call eldering. And I want to be very clear about what that means, because it is not what most of us were taught. It is not retiring from the world. It is embracing a richer, more essential role within it. An elder is anyone who recognizes it as a gift and a moral responsibility to pass on the wisdom, hope, joy, and knowledge they've accrued over their lifetime. An elder is someone motivated, above all, by love, to make their contribution and give back what you alone have to give. You cannot retire wisdom. The decades of experience you carry, the failures you've survived, the losses you've metabolized, the things you know in your bones that no 30-year-old has yet earned, it's not meant to go with you. It's meant to be shared with others. I'd like you to consider this. If elders withhold their wisdom, who will guide the world? Let me give you a couple examples. I don't want to just tell you this is possible. I want to show you. Let me tell you about my friend Alan. Alan is 71, and if you looked at his resume, photographer, heroin addict, salesman, Black Panther, journalist, and high school teacher, you would not immediately see a man about to become the architect of the Harlem Renaissance Cultural Center. But Alan spent years quietly, almost obsessively, researching the history and culture of Black America. Every time he and I would get together, he'd tell me stories that I just could not believe. He didn't think of it as anything meaningful. He just loved it. He was following the breadcrumbs without any idea about where they might take him. Then, one day, a journalist friend of Alan's from his past stumbled across something he'd written on Facebook. She was trying to create an exhibit for the Harlem Cultural Center and had no idea who could do it. When she approached Alan, he was terrified. He'd never done anything like this. He was convinced he was a fraud. But he poured himself into it anyways. Every interview, every biography, every painting, every corner of that history, and something happened. All of it converged. The photography, the activism, the years of teaching children on the margins, the personal obsession he'd written off as just a hobby. Every disparate, unlikely thread turned out to be preparation. When I asked him about it, he said, "Though I didn't even see it on the horizon, I feel as if I have been preparing for this project my entire life." One project led to another. Based on the work he and his partner had done, they then created a curriculum of Black history that they sold to teachers' associations across New Jersey. In our last conversation, Alan said to me, "Some of the worst things that ever happened to me, jail, heroin, poverty, racism, each have become the raw material being spun into solid gold." Then there's my friend Helena. In her mid-50s, Helena was a successful screenwriter in Hollywood who found herself frustrated and adrift, waiting for people who used to champion her work to give her a job. While waiting for her next job, she became obsessed by something she'd come across in the news: the rapidly shrinking worldwide rhino population, the poaching, and the extinction timeline of less than a decade away. So she went back to her home country of South Africa and visited a sanctuary dedicated to saving baby rhinos and their mothers. She came home to America on fire. Today, Helena and her 78-year-old partner David, a journalist turned animal activist, run babyrhinorescue.org, one of the most effective animal preservation organizations in the world. They have funded armed guards, purchased surveillance drones, trained guard dogs, and built electrified fences around numerous rhino sanctuaries across South Africa. They also created a group called the Rhino Warriors, a worldwide community of children who donate their lunch money and write to their schools and leaders about the crisis. A screenwriter who felt her time had passed, and a teacher and addict who thought his worst experiences had nothing to offer. This is what I mean when I say anything can happen. Absolutely anything. So, what ignites a calling, and how do you find yours? I've watched hundreds of people make this transition, and the breadcrumbs are almost always already there, waiting to be uncovered. They show up in the things you can't stop reading about, in the conversations that just go on forever where you lose track of time, in the skills you've spent a lifetime developing that to you feel almost too ordinary to mention, but to other people are extraordinary. Ask yourself, what has my life uniquely prepared me to give? Let me tell you how I personally experienced it, because it was unlike anything I'd experienced in my first two acts. There was a period in my life, in my late 40s, when I was at the absolute peak of my career. As a World's Fair and theme park designer and a filmmaker, I had just designed several pavilions for a World's Fair in South Korea, and I had produced the first computer-generated 3D IMAX film. It was voted Best of Expo. Then, 1 week before the expo was set to open, I was sent home. No explanation, no acknowledgement, no thank you very much, just gone. I came back to America shattered. And I let my hurt and resentment steal every ounce of confidence I had. I stumbled around for a few years after that, but I never regained the mojo I'd lost, while my life quietly organized around the story of me being a victim. Then, through a series of events I can only describe as miraculous, I found my way to becoming a yoga and meditation teacher, something I'd never planned on. And in that new role, I recognized something every single day. I was creating real value. People were being changed. I was loved and valued not for what I built or designed, but for who I was. After 15 years of teaching, I met 3 of the top people in the field of aging, all in the same weekend. Imagine. Each of them, the dean of the USC School of Gerontology, the president of AARP, and the top fitness instructor for the baby boom generation, said the same exact thing to me. You should write a book on aging. I was stunned. But after thinking about it for several weeks, I realized I'd spent my entire life preparing to do exactly this. My study of Oriental medicine, various diets, yoga, meditation, exercise, leading workshops in authentic happiness, and my previous book on discovering your life's purpose in your later years. Each was a chapter and a clear path to here. So I began writing, researching, sharing, and 5 years later I published The Art of Conscious Aging. And 2 years later, here I am sharing it with you. Along the way, a friend who has been a witness to my journey reminded me, God works in mysterious ways, doing for us what we have already been doing for ourselves. When you give yourself to something larger than you, something shifts. You stop asking, what's left for me? And you start asking, what's possible? Viktor Frankl understood that. In his thoughts on self-actualization, he said, it cannot be pursued directly. It can only arrive as a byproduct of fulfilling a purpose you give meaning to, of doing what you came here to do. When we do this, energy returns that you thought was the victim of aging. Doors open that you didn't know existed. The right people appear at the right moment. And the world, which was contracting, begins to expand again. And unimagined possibilities become your reality. I began by telling you about the third act identity crisis, and that it is not a winding down or a breaking down, but the opportunity for a breakthrough. The gap in the calendar at the end of our second act and the beginning of our third act is neither empty nor destructive. It is an opening, and what walks through that opening, if you let it, can be the most meaningful chapter of your life. Bob Dylan once wrote, "He not busy being born is busy dying." I believe the third act is not about retirement. That's the old story. But instead, it's about reimagining, recreating, reinventing, and ultimately, rebirth. Though you may never see the full impact of what you give, you may never know where your life turned on the axis of your kindness, your presence, your willingness to show up, you will know, without a doubt, that you acted from the highest and best in yourself. I have a plaque on my wall at home that a friend gave me years ago that reads, "Whatever your past, you have a spotless future." Just for today, notice where you feel called. Offer what you have. Trust that it is exactly enough, and know you are the gift you have to give. Thank you.